Thank you for joining us on Deviatus. This is a podcast produced every 2 weeks about the paranormal and the unexplained. My name is Jeremy, and you can follow the show at deviatus.com. We are also on Facebook, and you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at DeviatusPod. Just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone who has supported the show. I've had a really successful launch week and just an overwhelming level of support from the paranormal community and anyone interested in this, really. Anytime you try something new like launch a podcast, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, let's say. I'm definitely stepping out of my comfort zone by doing this, but you know, the paranormal community has just shown overwhelming support. A lot of people have been contacting me saying, hey, great show, I want to hear more. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that feedback, and more is coming. And I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions so far on the show. You can share this several ways. On deviatus.com, you can go and there's a contact page there where you can either email me or you can even call in and leave a voice message if you would like your message potentially played on an upcoming episode. Well, today I'm very excited about our guest. I only wish I could have managed to have him on a little bit sooner, but as you know, on episode 1, I had Elizabeth Saint from Destination America's Ghosts of Shepherdstown. Well, today I've got Bill Hartley, also from Ghosts of Shepherdstown. You know, all these guests have pretty busy schedules, and I was thankful to catch up with him on the road. I was actually able to call him and pick his brain about a few questions I had about the show, as well as his experience outside of the show prior to becoming one of the Destination America crew. So without wasting any further time, here is Bill Hartley from Ghosts of Shepherdstown.
Bill, thanks for joining us on Deviatus, and welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, before I jump into anything paranormal, tell me about this hat collection that I keep hearing about.
Oh, the hat collection. It's extensive to the point where my wife is like, I need to start eliminating hats or I'm going to start getting a divorce paper soon. So, and it's always been an addiction of mine for the last couple of years. Every time I go somewhere and see a hat, I buy it. And I buy it and I wear it a few times and then it gets stuck aside and then I pull it back out later on. And so it became sort of a running thing with the show that when we started filming, I came out in a hat, and then the next night I was wearing a different hat, to the point where they liked it so much, they're like, we want you in a hat every shot. And I'm like, at one point I want to make sure that people recognize that I have hair. I don't want people to think I have Captain Picard, the Captain Picard do. So I actually took flack for when I didn't wear a hat on one of the episodes for a brief period of time.
Yeah, I know your fans are asking for an auction of one of these hats here. Any plans to follow through on that?
Actually, Elizabeth and I, we've been doing a live Q&A every Tuesday night, basically answering questions that people want to, shoot us about the show, that week's episode, things like that. And the last one, I actually said that I'm going to post something on my Facebook, which will be before the start of the last episode, and I'll ask the viewers to message me the answer as soon as they see it. And the first person that gets the answer right, I will message back and say, you got it, and they're going to win one of the hats that I wore in production that I'll autograph and send to them.
Oh, that's a great idea. Well,
which will make my wife happy because that'll be one less thing in my house.
Right. I know, they don't like the things we collect all the time, do they?
Oh God, you should hear my wife talk. She's sitting here next to me just smiling because she I'm sure she has stories of things that she wants me to get rid of. My Star Wars collection, which has become extensive, my paranormal equipment, which is extensive, my hats, she'll tell you sunglasses, all this stuff. I'm a weird collector.
Well, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about your background in paranormal investigation, how you kind of founded the Greater Maryland Paranormal Society.
Yeah, it's a long road to get there. I actually grew up in a house in Baltimore, and my earliest childhood memories was being terrified of the basement. And as I got a little older, as I got to my teens, I started seeing a tall, thin, bald guy that would be walking through my house. And mind you, most of the time I would say it'd be peripheral vision. So like watching TV and you'd see someone walk past your door and then you look and no one's there. You'd kind of write it off as, I thought I saw someone walk past, but it could have been anything. I don't know. So it was kind of like that at first. And then at one point in time when I was about 13 or so, I went to go to the bathroom, at the 3 a.m. I've had way too much soda in the middle of the night call. Open my bedroom door and I see this tall, thin, bald guy just standing there in the hallway like Ghoul from Nosferatu or like the Thin Man from, Phantasm. Just standing there looking at my door and freaking me out. And I shut the door and treated it like a vampire attack and just pushed stuff against the door. I peed in a big golf cup and never left until I was in the sunlight. And it was like that until I was like 17, where I kept seeing him out of the corner of my eye. Then I would see him go past the door and turn, and I'd go look for him, and he wouldn't be there. And when I was 17 years old, I found out that a man that matched that description had killed himself in the basement of my house. And it was something because, I never asked or talked about what I was experiencing to anybody. Not friends, not family, I lived in the house with my mom and my grandfather, and I never even asked them if they had seen him. And it wasn't until after I found out that this description of this guy that I had seen had died in our house that I one night decided to broach the subject with my mom. And I just sort of asked her while we were playing cards one night if she had ever seen this guy. And she, gave me this 1,000-yard stare, like a Clint Eastwood look, squinty-eyed, hit a puff on her cigarette and goes, "Well, thank God you see him too." So, it was there is where I had that first experience, and then I ended up, moving out and moving into life and doing things that everyone would do, and I didn't have experiences for a long period of time. And then when I had become a Civil War reenactor in 2001, I started going to the battlefields and different places of historic reference, and I was going in uniform most times, and I started having experiences, small things, well, some small, some larger. Like I can remember being in Gettysburg at one point and feeling someone put their hand on my back and shove me forward, and when I turned around, no one was there. And then I got more interested in the paranormal side in early 2006 when I was at a place called Unger's Store, West Virginia, and it was a small little area, and we were putting on a living history at this house, and the house itself was there before the American Civil War, and it was actually the land and the house was used by Stonewall Jackson and his men and during the Bath Romney campaign of December 1861, January 1862. And there is written accounts. There's actually a book called Company H, and by one of the soldiers who was in the Georgia Brigade, who talks about being there and a nor'easter hitting and guys being frozen to death on post. And then it had a lot of history of tragedy with children that died of scarlet fever in the house in the 1880s, and a woman who took her life in the 1940s after getting the letter from the War Department about her husband dying overseas. So we're doing a living history there, and the family would say, "Look, just don't go upstairs. Don't go upstairs without somebody with you, because she's upstairs and she's very angry and very agitated, and if you try to go down the steps, she'll try to shove you down the steps." Okay, make a point not to do that, right? So we're sitting here, and mind you, it's now 10 o'clock at night, and we get word that there's a group of ghost hunters coming out. And mind you, this is the first time I even heard of the term ghost hunter, and these guys come off the bus, and they had to sign these paperwork saying that they can use our likeness, and they film us and all that stuff. And we ended up going into this back of this dark field where there's no light, and we're stumbling over rocks, and we're cussing each other out for why the hell are we doing this, and we're firing off volleys of gunfire with our muskets to try to quote unquote rouse the spirits. And the guy who was in command of the unit, Robbie Ambrose, actually at one point you can hear him say, "Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me," like he was bumping into somebody, and then he turned and said, "Wasn't someone just next to me?" And we're looking at him like, "What?" Now, if you had asked him, he would have told you. I saw what looked like another officer, he thought was a reenactor out there with us. And when he turned to go past him and looked again, the guy wasn't there. I got a really interesting photo from that night that showed a picture of a couple of the ladies who were in period dress with a soldier standing behind them. But if you look at his face, it's very white and skeletal looking. And you can make out the uniform being a cavalry uniform, and we had no cavalry at this event. So, more weird things happened at this house throughout the night. One of our guys had a camera that literally was smacked out of his hand, and it hit against the wall and broke when he asked if he could take a picture in the front parlor of the house. And things like that, to the point where I was so intrigued and I learned to use dowsing rods for the first time at this house, and I actually went home and built my own pair. And the night after I built it, I started buying books about the paranormal and stuff like that, and I decided, well, I think I'm really into this. I really think I want to start a group. And originally I was thinking of like a hobbyist team where it was like we'll go out and we'll do, you know, investigations at abandoned buildings or cemeteries or battlefields and stuff like that. But then as I started researching and reading and learning, I started realizing that all the events that I had through childhood and the events that I had as a Civil War reenactor, you know, they all kind of meshed together to make who I was. And I decided instead of making a hobbyist team where we just go play around and all that stuff, I started changing gears, founded the Greater Maryland Paranormal Society, and our mission purpose is to help others who are having events, paranormal activity that they're experiencing, whether it be home or residence or business or anything else, and try to give them the answers that I was looking for through all the years of experiencing it myself.
Okay. Well, and is it true that you guys filmed Ghost of Shepherdstown something like a year ago? And I guess if so, are you still doing investigations through your group?
Oh, yeah. The Greater Maryland Paranormal Society is an on-call service, so it's anytime someone reaches out to us and is in need, we work with them. We just did an investigation last Saturday on Maryland's Eastern Shore that we're still, you know, processing all the recorders and the cameras and everything else, and we have one set up June 30th in Laurel, Maryland. So yeah, we're very active.
I'm curious, do you still find anything kind of frightening about what you do as a paranormal investigator?
You know, I can say to this point, I've never seen anything that actually frightened me. Things that have taken me by surprise for sure. I mean, you know, even a good example would be the episode 3 of Ghost of Shepherdstown when me and Elizabeth was doing the sweep in the second floor and that attic door slammed. It's like one of those things that you don't expect to happen. So you get that initial slam, you jump a little bit, and then your heart's racing because now you got anxiety because, you know, wow, that just happened. And for me, I was so, you know, full of, I was so amped from it that when I reached the top of the steps, my heart was already racing. And then as I was reaching for the doorknob, and you didn't see it on the show because the camera guy wasn't like directly over my shoulder, but as I reached that doorknob to that door, the doorknob was turning in front of me. And I literally, at one point before I grabbed the doorknob, because I'm watching the doorknob turn, I looked down to production because, you know, it is a TV show. We have people who are, the producers and the camera guys and everybody's down at the bottom of these steps following me up. And I turned to them and I'm like, seriously, did someone from production slam that door? Because I'm a skeptic. I'm always a skeptic. I'll always be a skeptic. I have never watched a ghost show and was like, oh man, what great evidence. I'm like, just like with investigations, I'm looking at how did they pull that off, or what is going on here and how is it more earthbound than paranormal. So my first thought was door slams. I'm watching the doorknob turn. I'm thinking someone was upstairs. So when I asked them, I said, is there anybody upstairs? And they're like, no one's up there. And I'm like, are you sure? Because I'm going to be really, really pissed if I open this door and someone's at the top of the steps. And they're like, no, everyone is down here and down on the first floor. So I was like, all right. And so I grabbed the doorknob, and it just stopped turning, and I turned it, and I pushed the door, and I was expecting the door to kind of swing in, nice and smooth, and it literally felt like someone was pressing up against the door. So I actually had to kind of force the door open and then find a light, and it was pitch black up there. So if anyone was up there, they would have had to have, like, night vision on to see where they were going. And there was, like, you'll notice it if you watch the episode, there's like, piping, like, water pipes that come up, and they're about 4 feet, and I'm just thinking someone's running around in the dark, they're going to run into that and everything else. We flip the lights on. I go from corner to corner to corner. There is no way in or out of this attic except for the steps that we just came up in. So, yeah, I'm not frightened, but, full of anxiety and anxiousness and excitement over things like that. That's usually how I feel at things like this.
Yeah, I remember watching that episode, and you genuinely seemed surprised when that happened. And I should note for our listeners that, this conversation right now is occurring just hours before the finale airs of Ghost of Shepherdstown. So the podcast is probably going to air, a little bit after, a week or two after the finale. But do you feel like all of your work at Shepherdstown was finished after the events in the final episode, or do you feel like there's room for more investigation to occur?
To be honest with you, I think there's probably a lot more room for investigation. I mean, we do, as viewers who are probably, or listeners to this will know it after the show is aired, that we do come to a conclusion to the investigation that we're there for. But, honestly, when I was approached and, I'm told, well, you're going to investigate an entire town that's haunted, my first thing that popped in my head was the bull alarm. I'm like, no, that's not possible for an entire community to be, haunted. I mean, I can see certain areas, like, I can certainly tell you if you're next to a battlefield or something like that, then yeah, you might have something going on, but the whole town, no, I just didn't believe it. And, and it was like literally every place we went, there was something going on, to the point where by the time we wrapped and we were finished, I'm quite convinced you could put me, just roll me down the street blindfolded, and whatever house I hit into, I can walk out, pull out a meter, and find you something going on in. So yeah, I think even though we do find a conclusion to what we were looking for there, I think there's probably a lot more room to do more things in that town than that general vicinity.
Well, I think I'd like to discuss episode 5 a little bit. There was a moment where you became kind of nauseated and had to take a rest. Can you walk me through that experience and maybe what was going on in your mind and what maybe the cameras didn't show on the actual area of the show?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot that wasn't shown. And there's a lot I don't think that they could have shown because it was all internal with me. But, we had found, who we were looking for in the woods, and because their radio was not picking up our calls. So Nick got concerned, so we all went on a search to find them, because it is the woods, And so we get to this one spot, and while we're talking and everything else, and I noticed, and Nick says, well, go check it out, that there was like one spray-painted upside-down crucifix. Now, for me, I'm from Baltimore City. Seeing things spray-painted on things is kind of like a normal, so
yeah.
I first looked at it, and I'm like, that's weird. I haven't seen anything else graffiti. That's weird. And then I went up and looked at it, and then as I got to that one, I noticed that there was a rock a little further up where Nick was actually doing his jumps across the rock a little bit later on, where there was another spray-painted upside-down crucifix. And then as I looked off to my left, there was this hilly area with rocks and trees and all that stuff, and there was another boulder that had something else spray-painted on it, like a whole different design. And if I'm going to be honest, it looked like somebody had spray-painted a penis and balls, but, that's just what it looked like to me. But so we all decided to go up this little hilly area, and I'm like at the highest point, and I'm like up against this tree, and I'm like maintaining my balance. Fat guys don't really do well with balancing on little rocks, so I'm like making sure I got good footing and everything else. And everybody else is watching Nick, and they're doing the sweeps with the fleers. And while I'm standing there, the first thing I started feeling is this wave of nausea. And I'm thinking, am I going to get sick? Because I'm really feeling like I want to throw up. And, I was trying to kind of just brush it off because, we had been, traipsing through the woods. It was really ungodly hot, and it was very, very humid. And I'm just thinking, maybe the heat's starting to get to me a little bit. So I'm standing there, and then they're all noticing stuff in the trees, and they're doing, their sweeps with the FLIR and all that stuff. And while this is going on with them, my nausea then takes on a form of nausea plus anxiety, where I could feel my heart racing, and I was feeling super anxious. And then the anxiousness went away, and we got replaced with anger, where I was really, really feeling pissed off, and there was no reason for me to. And I literally think that if someone would have approached me at that point, I literally would have swung at them, because that was how angry I was feeling for no reason. And it was like, it kept interchanging. It kept going in waves. Then I went back to nauseous, then I went back to anxious. Then I went to the point where I was feeling angry again, and then it all started getting to the point where I was lightheaded, and I felt like I was going to black out, and I literally felt like I just wanted to lay down right there, and it was like people, started noticing that I wasn't myself because they're like asking me questions, and are you getting any readings with this and that, and I'm just in a zone, like I don't even hear them talking,
Right.
And then they're like, Nick is like back in the woods, and and they're telling me, because I don't remember parts of it, that they were yelling for him to come back, and he was like in his own little world doing what he was doing, and it was like everything was just going weird for all of us at that point. And and like Elizabeth and them are standing, and Lori and them are standing right there at the bottom of this hill, and they're like confused because like he's doing his thing and I'm waving and going back and forth on my end, and then eventually Nick comes back and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm telling him, "No, I feel like I want to lay down." And then they're like, "Well, maybe you should get out of this area." And I literally have very vague memories of saying, "Okay," and starting to walk down this hill and getting towards the bottom, and Addison, who was one of their camera guys, I remember him moving the camera aside and like reaching out his hand to me to help me down off these, off the side of this rocky hill. And I remember taking his hand and then stepping down, and then I don't have any memories from letting go of his hand, walking the 100 paces or so that I went, and sitting down on a cinder block in the middle of the woods. I don't have no memories of that. My only memory from coming off that hill to that cinder block was everybody coming around me and asking if I was okay, and there literally were a point, there was a discussion where they were thinking about getting me an ambulance, and I was like, "No, I'm fine, I'm good, let's keep going." And Lori said, "Well, maybe we should try this," and one of the guys, Haley Pressman, who's one of the producers, comes running from like the other side of the area with a cold Gatorade and says, "Here, drink this," and he hands it to me, and I'm guzzling that, and Lori's doing sage around me and everything else, and the whole night from then was just sort of like in and out consciousness, to be honest with you. I know we did something down by the rocks, but I remember standing there, but I don't remember what they did. I don't really remember so much about even going back to the hotel room afterwards. And the next morning, I know I had slept about 12 hours from the time I got to the room to the time that I woke up, and I felt like I hadn't gotten 5 minutes of sleep. I was still groggy that whole next day.
Wow, that's quite an experience. Do you think there's any... Go ahead.
I said it really, really sucked, and I never have experienced anything like that in the past. I hope to God I never experience anything like that again. And they were telling me, and I think it showed on the show, because they hit me with the FLIR, and like my one arm was like completely blue. And it was, like I said, hot. It was super hot that night. We were all drenched in sweat. And they were like coming up and putting their hands on me and saying that I felt like I had been sitting in front of an air conditioner the whole time.
Now those images that we see on the final show are of the FLIR specifically. I remember that, and it did look blue. And do they edit those at all for the viewers to maybe have something like that stand out more?
All the stuff that we got on the FLIRs and everything else, we actually transferred to a computer, and I think we I don't know if it was that episode or something we do this upcoming episode for tonight's show, but we actually have all those images that were on the computer, because the FLIR would take, like the FLIR 1 that Elizabeth was using, which is a iPhone attachment, because the other FLIR, the FLIR gun, believe it or not, takes really like stamp-sized photographs. It's really bad. But with the FLIR 1 that was the iPhone attachment, she could do full video. But when she would take pictures, like it would take a picture that would be a normal shot and then the shot of the FLIR at the same time. So you can compare the two together. But like it never got to where production got a hold of it and messed with it, because we had it straight from Elizabeth's phone to our computer.
Wow. Would you say there's any locations that you wish you had the opportunity to go back and visit, or maybe ones that you wish you had visited while you were filming there?
There is a lot of talk, and I've had a lot of people during filming and since, and especially since the show has aired, where they have said stuff like Miller Hall, which is part of Shepherd University. That's the place that I really wish we would have been able to get into. And I unfortunately was even asked to go actually next week to an investigation in there, and I had prior engagements that I couldn't make it. So hopefully that I'll be able to get around to that sooner or later. But yeah, Miller Hall is definitely one of those places that I would love to go into. And I was actually told by one of the officers in Shepherdstown of a couple instances they have at one of the local schools. I can't remember if it was a middle school or an elementary school, but they said that they had an episode there where, like, they even sent in the police canine dogs because they found one of the doors was open, and when they got in there, they sent the dogs in, and the dogs was reacting as if they had somebody in their sights where they would lock and kind of stare. But they said that when they got to the dog, there was nobody there, and they couldn't find any evidence of anyone being in the building, with the exception of doors that were open.
Wow. Do you believe after leaving that the police and the people of Shepherdstown have the resources they need to deal with any future paranormal issues?
Well, I could definitely tell you, being that, you know, having had the wonderful opportunity of meeting the officers of the Shepherdstown police, I think they're a fine crew of police officers, but not one of them is a ghost hunter or a paranormal investigator. So I honestly do expect that even if it isn't show related, sooner or later Mike's going to give me a call and say, "Hey, Bill, you want to come back and check this out?" You know, it is one of those things that I think that they can handle anything earthbound, but when it comes to the paranormal stuff, they're definitely not. They don't have the resources for that.
Well, I imagine there's no training for that as well as in law enforcement. But if, or should I say, when the show does get renewed, do you have any idea of where you might pick up the investigation?
No clue. I mean, officially, because ever since first episode aired, we've been fielding that question about, you know, will there be a possibility of a season 2, and if and whens and wheres, and really we have no clue. I mean, we were, I know Elizabeth and I both had sent separate emails to Destination America saying, look, we're getting a lot of questions about this. How do you want us to answer it? And they said, well, honestly, short and simple, if there is to be anything else that involves the three of us getting back together for investigations, absolutely no determination of that is going to happen until after the series is over. So I think that it is one of those things, because network side, of course, you have to look at numbers and you know, is there a demand for it? Do people want to see us back and things like that? So I know that there's been a lot of interesting things come from this, like an online petition, and there's a lot of people who are tagging Destination America on their Facebook and Twitter posts, and they're like, season 2, renew, this, that, and the other. And I can tell you, it's humbling to see how many people really like what we did, and it's nice to know that they want to see more of us. But as a network side, they're not even going to think about it until after this episode is aired, and they see how well it does.
Well, I can say that I've been one of the people to sign that petition, and I think your fan base, the Bill Brigade, was responsible for tweeting that.
They are, and
that's
weird for me. It's weird for me because, you know, I am not a TV guy. I don't really perceive myself as being someone who would have a fan base, and it's just weird hearing, you know, fan base and the fact that there's actually a fan website, you know, or a Twitter page and a Facebook page dedicated to me. I'm like, my wife doesn't even find me that interesting, and she married me. So, I mean, the fact that there's a whole group of people out there who are following you like that is just odd.
Well, I think it's definitely worthy of a season 2 myself. But I want to be really respectful of your time. We got a couple minutes left, so I'd like to try something new on my show. I think we have time for a lightning round, and how that works is I'm going to give you an activity, and if you could respond by telling me which of your castmates, either Nick, Elizabeth, or yourself, would be most likely to do that activity.
Oh, God. Okay, we can try that.
All right. And feel free to let me know if any of these are off limits. I can edit it out in post.
You would find, if you listen to any of my other interviews, that I usually so forthcoming that people tell me to shut up. So go for it.
All right. Leave a cell phone on during an EVP session.
Oh, I would say that would be Nick.
Okay. Forget equipment on an investigation.
That would be me.
How about pull a prank on your other castmate?
That's not fair. My wife's pointing at me, so I guess me.
You're not going to fall on the sword for all these, are you?
I very well might. I've kind of shot myself in the foot with a couple interviews, you know. But yeah.
Okay, how about participate in cosplay at Comic-Con?
Yeah, that would be me. Actually, funny thing is, me and Elizabeth next week, which would be the weekend of, what is that, the 19th? No, what's next weekend? Whatever next weekend's date is. Me and Elizabeth are actually going to be at a cosplay gamers convention. And I told Elizabeth that I'm going to bring my vest that I wear from Ghost of Shepherdstown with my equipment, and I'm going to cosplay as myself.
Oh, wow, that's perfect. That played right into the
I think I can. I think I can pull off that look.
How about who would order a soy latte?
Oh, that's definitely Elizabeth.
Okay.
And if you got it wrong, she's most likely to stab you.
I didn't have that one on there, but that's good to know.
I like to throw in little extras that I know. Yeah, she's violent that way. Who would get a ticket for reckless driving? Elizabeth. You gotta understand, when we filmed, production gave us all rooms, but her and I both in different directions lived about an hour and a half from Shepherdstown, and because she had just had a baby and she was, lactating, so she would literally, instead of staying in the room, would drive back to Virginia in the middle of the night and then come back the next morning, and she'd be texting us the whole time. So reckless driving falls right on Miss Saint.
And who would you think would be best known to take a selfie with a fan?
Me. I'm the only one on production that actually had a selfie stick.
Oh, you kind of cut out there for a second.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that last one would be me because I'm the only one of the three of us that actually owns not just one but two selfie sticks.
Two of them?
Yeah. I couldn't find one. I bought another one. Oh, I have two.
Well, thank you for answering those. And again, thank you for all of your time today. I'm very excited tonight to be watching the finale of Ghost of Shepherdstown. And let me know if you guys, end up doing additional shows. I'd love to have you back on.
Well, thank you for having me on and Elizabeth. I'm sure Elizabeth was quite a hard interview. So I apologize for her in advance. But we'd be happy to come on anytime. Yeah, well, she'll tell you that, too, and I don't buy her stories. Not one.
Well, before you sign off, can you tell us where we can follow your work and your social media accounts?
Yeah, if anyone's interested in what I do on the actual paranormal side, they can Google Greater Maryland Paranormal Society. They'll find our website, and we have a Facebook. We have a Facebook page and things like that. And if anyone wants to know me on the social media side, I have 3 Facebook pages. All of them are Bill Hartley. One's, and I hate to say it, is a fan site, so I'd have to blue check. And then there are 2 that are personals, and I usually accept all friends requests because I'm kind of a junkie that way. And, of course, I can be found on Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr and just about any other social media site that I can get my hands on.
All right, Bill. Well, it's certainly been a pleasure, and go have fun watching your finale.
Oh, yeah, there's nothing more fun than watching myself on TV.
I wouldn't imagine so. All right, you take care. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Once again, a big thanks to Bill Hartley. I have posted all of the links he mentioned on my show notes page. You can find that at deviatus.com/Hartley. That's Hartley. This now concludes our 6th episode of Deviatus. As I said before, if you'd like to connect with me or ask any questions about the show, please connect with me at deviatus.com. Or if you're so inclined, I would love it, absolutely love it, if you could go to iTunes and leave the show a review and a rating. Just as a reminder, this show is produced every 2 weeks. I've already got 3 or 4 episodes recorded that I'm working on finalizing the editing for. I have some in the queue, folks, so come on back. And until next time, thank you for listening.